So the next unit we're going to do is the respiratory system. Respiratory system, the functions are to provide an area for gas exchange between the blood and the air, carbon dioxide into the lungs to be breathed out, and oxygen into the blood. Okay, so what ends up happening is we see that in this diagram, the blood will carry carbon dioxide waste away from your muscles and away from your body systems, bring it to the lungs where it is breathed out. And then that inhale, we bring in oxygen, which is carried by red blood cells to the muscles. So remember, during cellular respiration, one of the inputs is oxygen. So we know that the input oxygen is taken in through the lungs and sent to the muscles of the body. And we know that one of the outputs of respiration is CO2, and that's where that waste CO2 is from. Functions: warm, moisten the air, and filter the air before it reaches the lungs. Okay, so one of the functions of the respiratory system, as you breathe it in, it'll moisten the air. Your nose will actually do that as well. That's why in the cold, breathing through your nose can help a little bit, and it helps your air. Functions: produces sound needed for speech. So we see right here, we have talking, and what ends up happening is air rushes past your vocal cords, and those vocal cords vibrate, causing sounds, and aids in the sense of smell. All right, so all the respiratory system. Membranes and cavities. So most of the respiratory organs are located in the thoracic cavity, the empty space in the chest. So we see the thoracic cavity is where you're going to see your lungs. You see in the upper part. So your lungs and your heart are all in that same region. So each of these body cavities and many of the organs within are lined with serous membrane made of two thin layers of tissue with a fluid layer in between. Visceral pleura covers the surface of the organ, such as the lungs, and the walls of the cavity are covered by parietal pleura. Okay, so we have these two membranes around the lungs to help them. The nasal cavity, the epithelium of the nasal cavity has two types of cells. The mucus cells produce a sticky secretion to trap foreign particles, and the ciliated columnar epithelium propels the mucus toward the pharynx where it is swallowed. So this is part of the protection of your respiratory system. The mucus will help to prevent things from entering into your lungs. Additional mucus is produced in the paranasal sinuses, which are empty spaces in the frontal sphenoid, ethmoid, and maxilla bones. So we see our sinuses. We talked about sinuses during the skeletal system. So this diagram right here, the nasal cavity and oral cavity are separated by a bony hard palate and soft palate made of cartilage. So we separate the nasal cavity and the oral cavity, your mouth and your nose area, by what we call a palate. Okay, and that helps keep them separated. The nasal conchae are three curled bones, all right, shelves in the nasal cavity that force air to flow over the largest possible surface area of cilia. Okay, so what you have is these layers will help to flow over the cilia and help to pull things out and get smells. Air exits the nasal cavity through the nasopharynx. Next down, all right, is the larynx. During respiration, a flap of tissue called the epiglottis remains open, allowing air to pass through the glottis into the larynx. Larynx contains the vocal cords, which vibrate to produce sound. So your vocal cords in the larynx. So the epiglottis, we know the epiglottis helps to protect from things going into your lungs. Okay, so you're eating food. That's why you shouldn't talk with your mouth full, because when you're talking, the epiglottis is open, all right, when you're breathing, talking, all that. And then what ends up happening, because air is passing, what ends up happening is when you're eating, that's when food goes down the wrong pipe. That's what they call it. Vocal folds are located directly posterior to the thyroid cartilage, which is externally described as the Adam's apple. All right? And here's a diagram showing all the sinuses, the tonsils, the hyoid bones, right, cartilage. All right. A diagram like this, specifically of this area, I'm not going to ask you about things like that. I would know the larynx. All right. I would know the larynx, the pharynx, esophagus. I would make sure you know where the trachea is, in reference to each other. That's the type of things that I would like you to know. So basically anything that we do a major slide on is something that you should know. Okay, so we did the sinus cavity and the mouth. We went into the larynx, and now we're in the trachea. Is about 4-inch tube that delivers air to the bronchi of the lungs. It's lined with C-shaped tracheal cartilages that stiffen the walls and prevent them from closing. Right, so it provides structure and support. So what's going to end up happening is your trachea, having those cartilaginous rings, helps prevent it from closing. Because obviously, if your trachea is shut, you're not going to get any oxygen in because it's below your mouth and sinus cavity, all right? And because it's lower than that, if that shuts, your lungs aren't getting any air and you're going to suffocate. So we see right here it is. There's the epiglottis at the top. There's hyoid bone. There's ligaments. There's thyroid cartilage, all right? And then more cartilage, all right? And then from the trachea, it goes into the bronchi. The division of the trachea, the bronchi continue to subdivide, becoming more and more narrow. Primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and then into bronchioles. Okay, so bronchi into bronchioles, and bronchi lead into the lungs. Okay, so when it branches into bronchi, those are going to go into your lungs, and then they finally branch down into bronchioles, and we'll talk about what happens thereafter. Lungs are asymmetrical. Left lung is smaller to accommodate the heart. So we know the heart is to the left side. All right. The lobes of the right lung are named superior, middle, and inferior. And then there's no middle lobe in the left lung, again, because it's smaller because of the heart. So again, here we see there's the larynx, there's the trachea. All right. Again, there's the lobes of the right lung. All right. There's the primary bronchi on the left lung. All right, we see secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and then finally those tiniest small branches are the bronchioles. There's the visceral pleura to help protect the lungs, help it to move, and pleural space, parietal pleura, and the diaphragm. Diaphragm is going to be important. It's a muscular sheet, and the diaphragm is going to help you to inhale and exhale. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Alveoli, the smallest bronchioles, and its small air-filled sacs called alveoli. This is where gas exchange occurs between the alveoli and the blood surrounding in the capillaries. Okay, so gas exchange occurs in the alveoli. They have a thin membrane that allows CO2 to come out, so we can breathe that out, and oxygen. All right, and we see right here the alveoli are surrounded by specialized cells. Surfactants secreting cells produce lipid that reduces the surface tension of water, preventing the wet surfaces of the alveoli from sticking together. Macrophages are white blood cells that will ingest bacteria, viruses, or foreign objects that are inhaled. Capillaries allow red blood cells to pass near the alveoli. And simple squamous cells provide a barrier thin enough for O2 and CO2 to diffuse through. And here is, again, a diagram showing the alveoli, the capillary, and the gas exchange.